Afghanistan is caught in a vicious cycle of struggle between the progressive forces of the society and those oppose any modernization attempts. Written by Dr. Noor Ahmed Khalidi. My name is Sonia. In this video, I would like to provide you with a brief overview of the situation in Afghanistan over 2 years, post the US withdrawal. Please like the video, subscribe and press the notification bell. As we know, after 20 years, the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan fell on August 15, 2021. And the Tehrik-e-Taliban Afghanistan established the government of the Islamic Emirate for the second time. Despite the many problems and inadequacies in the government of the Republic, the people of Afghanistan had high hopes for a bright future and an advanced, democratic, and civilized Afghanistan under the framework of the Islamic Republic and the 2004 Constitution. Despite widespread corruption and the creation of social cracks as a result of the implementation of nationalistic policies by a number of political activists, the achievements of the Islamic Republic in the fields of guaranteeing people's fundamental rights, guaranteeing social and political freedoms, education, improving public health, higher education, establishment of government foundations, communication lines, telecommunication facilities, information and culture, development of the banking system, development of foreign trade, increase of domestic revenue, legislation, air transportation, civil society, etc. are significant fields. But the victory of the Taliban based on the enforcement of Sharia, according to the primitive interpretation, and the enforcement of unequal and backward rural traditions on today's urban societies. What the Taliban have offered to the people of Afghanistan: the end of suicide attacks, the end of the war with the National Army, the relative security of the country, the end of local power islands of warlords and the powerful in villages and cities, the end of the anarchy of the encroachment of lands and state assets by the powerful, anti-national propaganda in domestic media, improving government revenues, and ending administrative corruption. In the 2 years of their rule, what the Taliban have taken from the people of Afghanistan are the constitution, the participation of the people, political and social parties, and organizations in the administration and politics of the government, the civil and political rights of the people, cultural freedoms, the independence of the 3 governmental forces, social and civil liberties. In the 2 years of their rule, what the Taliban have imposed on the people are gender apartheid, or the complete exclusion of women from men in social life, preventing girls and women from education, and preventing women and girls from working outside the home. The Islamic Emirate of the Taliban is in fact a revival of the values of the struggle of My Lang and the restoration of the order of the Sakor government. In this way, unfortunately, we are witnessing the freezing of time in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, 104 years after independence, we are still facing the same issues and the same elements that caused the failure of Shah Amanullah Khan's reform programs. And evaluated, why is time frozen in Afghanistan? For nearly half a century, Afghanistan has been burning in the tragedy of unfortunate events as a result of political instability. What is at the heart of this national tragedy is Afghanistan's economic and social backwardness from contemporary civilization and industry. In a situation where nearly 70% of Afghanistan's population lives in rural areas and relies on agricultural economy and rural relations, half a century of political instability, war, illiteracy, and low literacy, and the domination of primitive reactionaries over the rural population, have deepened this civilizational vacuum as a ground for growth. It has provided religious extremist elements against development and their rule in the countryside. The victims of this half-century tragedy have been the people of all ethnicities. and languages of Afghanistan, especially the Pashtun-inhabited areas of the country in the neighborhood of Pakistan. With the return to power of primitive and hardened extremists of the Taliban, the truth became clear to everyone that the main theme of this half-century conflict in Afghanistan has been the ideological struggle between progress and reaction. In the last 100 years in Afghanistan, the sequence of struggle between good, bad, and ugly is clearly evident from Independence Day in 1919 until today. The struggle between warlords and local tyrants, and the central government, as well as the struggle between traditional fundamentalist elements led by clerics and progressive forces who wish to progress the country in the train of the advanced countries of the world, is still going on. Just as the ancient colonialists used the dual method of confronting and supporting religious fundamentalism until 100 years ago, today the modern Western colonialism, with its imperialist method, confronts or supports extremism according to its current interests and long-term strategic interests. The growth and spread of religious extremist terrorism has played an important role, and they are engaged in a big new colonial game with the fate of nations, including the fate of our nation. This political instability started with the fall of the constitutional monarchy system based on the Constitution, and provided the ground for the failed experiences of systems based on socialist, communist ideologies, jihadist Islamism, petrified primitive Islamism, and finally the liberal democracy of the Mafia Republic. Moreover, as a result of this political instability and the weakness of the central government, Afghanistan became the first-class center of drug production and trafficking and administrative corruption in the world. As a result of the continuation of this political instability, turning Afghanistan into a proxy intelligence battlefield and a breeding ground for terrorist groups, including ISIS criminals, that the security of the countries of the region and has endangered the world. What is at the heart of this national tragedy is Afghanistan's economic and social backwardness from contemporary civilization and industry. In a situation where nearly 70% of Afghanistan's population lives in rural areas and relies on agricultural economy and rural relations, half a century of political instability, war, illiteracy, and low literacy, and the domination of primitive reactionaries over the rural population, have deepened this civilizational vacuum as a ground for growth. In the same sequence, those who opposed the Yemeni movement and 1990s revived as fundamentalist and Islamist jihadist organizations in the ranks of popular uprisings, and destroyed thousands of schools in the 7th coup d'état. They set fire and martyred thousands of innocent teachers and students. Unfortunately, during the 20 years of the rule of the Islamic Republic, the Mafia Republic, the mentality of religious extremism, takfiri, of Mujahid Parvar was introduced into the curriculum of the religious themes of the country's education system, and the emanations of such a destructive mentality are published in the society from behind the important tribunes through the national media. The takfiri mentality calls the opponents infidels and cites verses and hadiths for the legitimacy of its fatwa. Various forms so far, in the historical debate between knowledge and ignorance. And after Shams Nahar, which is about modernity and its confrontation with tradition. And during the first and second constitutional movements, the Yemeni movement, and Lati calling Shah Aman Allah, and until now it has guarded ignorance and laid the groundwork for rebellion, it was announced on the 9th of September and in the tent of the lawyer Jirga. This mentality was expressed in a different way by one of the senior speakers of this thinking. The aristocracy of jihad and their mafia domination. And the citizens of the country were divided into first and second degree. And it was announced that the mujahid is not equal to others. And the one who denies it is a disbeliever in God. Even today's generations of people are in the same antagonistic roles of their fathers and grandfathers. For example, if almost 100 years ago Kalalula Khalili supported Habibullah Kalkani by his side, his son is today by the side of Shura Nozor. Even today, there are people who consider Mujahid to be superior to other members of the society and demand more privileges in order to continue the rule of the jihadi mafia. It is not only the Taliban who are against the manifestations of today's common culture in the world and do not recognize any law other than Sharia, but there are also gangs of former Mujahideen who have set up field courts in the cities, suburbs of the country in opposition to the manifestations of today's civilization and common culture. They give orders to stone people. It's like time is frozen in Afghanistan. Over the past 100 years, religious fanatics who opposed progressivism or modernism include fundamentalists, Islamists, and recently Wahhabi and Takfiri groups. Those who opposed the Amani movement in the democracy decade of 1964-1973 began to oppose individual and social freedoms. During this period, acid spraying on schoolgirls became common. Afghanistan is in the vicious cycle of progressive forces versus the reactionaries, reducing the central issue of Afghanistan's political instability from the main cause of the struggle between progress and regression to the historical biased conflict of the Pashtun and Tajik ethnic groups by the anti-national elements of Afghanistan found an influential and powerful supporter in the existence of Pakistan and this false an anti-national perception as the reason. Just as the ancient colonialists used the dual method of confronting and supporting religious fundamentalism until 100 years ago. Today the modern Western colonialism, with its imperialist method, confronts or supports extremism according to its current interests and long-term strategic interests. The growth and spread of religious extremist terrorism has played an important role. And they are engaged in a big new colonial game with the fate of nations, including the fate of our nation, as a result of which the healthy development process of state building, democracy and the responsible national press in the country were damaged, leading to the weakening of the government, which became one of the factors of the downfall of the republic. Unfortunately, this type of perception is still widespread among a range of activists of the anti-Taliban resistance group, and it is considered a major obstacle to the creation of a progressive national alliance against Taliban extremism and primitiveness. It should be known that saving Afghanistan from the monster of religious extremism and Talibanism cannot be continued at the same time as opposing the honorable values of the Afghan nation, including the name of the country and the internationally recognized nationality of as an Afghan. Thank you for your attention. Please like the video, subscribe and press the notification bell.